I did 18 years.
Wow. And
And
that's
then
kind of near Boston.
about 30 minutes north of Boston, correct?
So you have all the benefits of living in the freest state in the nation,
Absolutely.
close enough to all the culture and
Yes. East we have the ocean, west we have the countryside, and north we have the mountains, and south we have Boston, so it's perfect. But cold.
when did you graduate high school?
1998.
Okay. So did you join the Marines right after high school or
I actually knew at 17 I was going in, so I did the delayed entry program. That was, my goal once I graduated, and luckily I was able to do that.
and they send women to Paris Island.
Correct. All women go
Go to
there.
Paris
Hmm.
Island. So tell me about what it was like to go to Paris Island. What was the first day like? Is the bus trip like all they make it out to be, you know?
Well, first of all, my recruiter totally, he didn't set me up. He told me everything, but what he did tell me was if you don't make it through boot camp, I'm never putting another female in. I happened to be his first female, and he was a grunt in the Marine Corps. So back then, women weren't really necessarily the best gender to put in. But that challenge kind of is what drove me through boot camp. He told me everything to what to expect. And when I got down there, he just said to me, the first thing they're going to do is dump your foot locker, so make sure your lock is locked. And sure enough, I was the only one with a locked foot locker. So that made things a lot easier moving forward. I actually loved boot camp. The bus ride down was a little bit nerve wracking. In fact, the drill instructor at that time had basically gone in between the seats and told us to get off the bus and didn't move from the aisle. So, that was a little nerve wracking, but I was totally loving boot camp.
Was there something that your drill instructors there taught you about being a woman Marine? Was there a culture they tried to teach you all about while you were there about what it meant?
At that time, again, it was not fully acceptable for women Marines. There was still the divide. There still is a divide. They're closing that gap more and more, even now, 20 years later. I specifically remember, though, one drill instructor. We were all sitting down in a class, and she said it was a super high percentage. I want to say it was like 75 or 80% of the platoon, actually, the series that we were in, was going to end up married, pregnant, or something else prior to our first enlistment. And I remember specifically, like they were pounding it in our head. And I remember specifically, I will not be one of those female Marines. I just remember that one moment being so significant in my life that I just wanted to travel the world and go to different duty stations and see everything I could. That was probably the most impactful part of the entire experience at boot camp, just remembering that speech and trying to get through the first 4 years. And I did do that, thank God.
So after the first 4 years, that takes you to about 2002.
Correct.
So 9/11 had already happened.
Correct.
Did you deploy in your first enlistment?
I did for my first duty station, but it was considered a deployment, but it was to Okinawa, Japan. But that was the only deployment I had. I tried to deploy after 9/11, but I was also injured at the same time. So I was kind of held on a med board duty status, and 3 attempts I tried, but I never really made it, unfortunately.
Okay, tell me about your job in the Marine Corps.
In the Marine Corps, I was a motor transport operator, and I drove a 22 and a half ton LVS truck, sometimes tandem tow. We were vehicle carriers, personnel carriers, whatever we needed to move, we moved. There wasn't a whole lot of us females. There were probably a handful in comparison to the hundreds of male Marines that we had by our side. That was still an MOS that wasn't really excited about having females. It's hard labor, busting down tires, lifting objects, ratcheting down chains to hold heavy equipment. These are all the things that you had to be pretty strong to do. So there was a few females, but I did get injured. So at that point, I couldn't work in the motor pool anymore. So I OJT'd into legal and administrative side of the house.
Okay. How many years did you serve?
Just under 4 active because I had the med board and I got out. So it was like 3 years and 9 months, I believe. And then after that, I got out, I went back home, and then I came back as a civil servant. So all in all, that brought me to 2013. So quite a bit. But I also served with the Marines all that time. It was all in like a military augmented position. So when the war kicked off after 9/11, those billets that were left behind is what I filled. So my OJT job transferred over really nicely. So luckily, it all happened for a reason.
When you separated and all that was done, when did you get married?
In 2002.
In 2002.
Correct.
So,
After I got out.
so after you got out, you got married and started
Correct.
a family.
Yes, all in 2002. Moved back to Camp Lejeune, got married, got out. Oh, that was a big year for me.
Was he also a Marine?
He was active duty, correct.
Okay. How personal do you want to get? What happened?
So my ex-husband was actually my abuser in the Marine Corps, back in Okinawa, Japan. And at that time, I was too young. I was underage, couldn't report anything. And at that point in my life, just being young, naive, immature, the whole feel sorry for me, but this is all I know kind of philosophy is kind of what I lived on for years. And so by marrying him, I felt that that was the easiest way to go. So it was basically 17 years of hell that I lived just because I lived with this doubt and this secret that I couldn't really tell. I didn't know who to tell. And at that time, if you told, it wasn't really, it was frowned upon. I would have been, looked at in a certain light, whereas, it was not really anything that I did personally. But yeah.
So 2013 comes around and you're in your own kind of personal hell.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got kids.
We're now in Hawaii, stationed there.
When did you decide to leave?
In 2013. It almost seemed like the minute that we landed in Hawaii, I almost knew that this was going to be the transition from being married. At that time, I started working in Hawaii, but between job, going through divorce, some major things were happening internally, and I couldn't work anymore. So that kind of just exacerbated the whole situation. I felt, though, that Hawaii was more of a healing spot, and I also knew that if any place I was going to go through this was the place I wanted to be. And I was extremely grateful to get those orders because it's like I just knew, like, the light was there at the end of the tunnel. So the proceedings started from like 13 to 2014, and then ultimately ending with the assault that happened in 2014. And that's what created the separation.
How did you get to Texas?
Well, through the whole divorce proceedings, I ended up homeless. We lived in a veteran shelter there in Hawaii. Ended up living in a pretty horrible place that Catholic Charities finally put us in. Ended up having to get homeless again because the situation, we had rats and cockroaches and some really nasty things going on. I ended up getting into a nicer place, but it was just too expensive. And even though the divorce was finalized, which was in July of 2015, my hopes of staying in Hawaii were just hopes. Financially, there was no way. I mean, we were going to end up homeless again if we didn't make a decision. And at that time, my daughter's gymnastics had really, it took a hard hit when we were homeless because I couldn't afford even the gymnastics. But her desire to leave and my son's desire to leave is what kind of catapulted us. And I had a good friend that was involved throughout the whole transition, and she became a flight attendant. And she says, "Hey, Jen, I can get you 3 standby tickets if you want to leave the island. Wherever you want to go, just here you can have them." And I said, "Okay, great." So we started looking at places on a map, and we literally just did a circle. And we were like, well, where do we want to go? Do we want to go back home, East Coast, where it's freezing and expensive? Do we want to go West Coast, where it's warmer but expensive? Or do we want to go somewhere in the middle and possibly near a gymnastics, hub? And Texas being super veteran friendly, and also kind of like the gymnastics capital of the world, which, well, was at that time. I figured, hey, let's move to Houston. It's only 45 minutes down the road from the Olympic Training Center. And if we're flying there already, why not just drive there? It's cheaper. So, thinking in cost, we kind of narrowed it down to Houston. And we got the flights. We packed 11 bags of luggage of just clothes, and we sold everything else we could, and what we couldn't sell, we threw in storage. We were 27th, 28th, and 29th on the standby list, leaving Hawaii with a service dog and a cat. Cat already boarded, dog on lap. And I'm like, there's no way we're going to make this flight. There's no way, not being 27th, 28th, and 29th. So we were sitting there, and literally with our heads bowed, we were just praying, please get us off this rock. Just get us off this island, and we'll figure out the rest from there. And I'm not kidding you, 30 minutes before the flight, we got called up, and our seats were separate. But I said, I don't care where we sit, just put us on that plane. And we got on the plane. And luckily enough, the people that could switch, literally, we were able to sit together at the back of the plane. We had good seats in the front, and the people were like, heck yeah, we'll take the bigger seats. And that's how we got home. We got here to Houston.
So how did it feel to take off out of there? What was it like?
I had been moving stuff for 3 days and didn't even have a chance to take a shower, and I did not care. I just wanted on that plane, and just like to get back to the mainland was just the most amazing feeling. As soon as we took off the runway, I think I just shed 15 minutes of tears, because I felt stuck there. I felt like if I didn't leave there at that time, even though leaving friends and gymnastics and multiple islands that are beautiful, I still felt like that was a piece of me that I was ready to let go 17 years prior. So it was just the best feeling ever. Although when we landed, it wasn't so good because everything kind of hit the fan. Didn't know where we were going for hotel. We had just a little bit of money. We didn't have a car. I couldn't rent a car because my credit was shot. So all the things that I had to deal with through divorce, I dealt with when I landed. But by the grace of God, everything lined up perfectly. And so we got
Tell me what you did first. I mean, when you landed.
Well, I called my mother and I said, my debit card is not working for a rental car because they need a credit card. I need you to give me a credit card. And so getting a car to get to a hotel, because I didn't realize just how wide Houston was. So we flew into Bush, and I'm like, okay, where do we go now? Houston is 30 minutes away. I can't Uber there. So we found a rental car. I had that for about a month, and we were looking for another car. We found this really cheap hotel that was $30 a night, and I kind of bargained with him a little bit, and we just kind of went day by day, and I knew I had enough for 2 weeks. While looking for houses, I get a phone call from another gymnast mom saying, hey, my daughter is missing your daughter. She really wants to go to this gym. Do you mind hosting her until we can come back to the United States, also being a military family? And I said, sure, but you do realize I'm kind of still in a hotel and I don't really have anything for furniture. She's like, no, it's okay. It's okay. It'll work out. So I'm not kidding you. The day that I found this house, I was picking her up from the airport, going to get the keys to the house, and we all going together as a new family. It was the craziest thing. So we had her for 2 months, and we were living on air mattresses, going little by little, just buying simple things like forks and spoons and finding used things in Bender's Landing. We became very frugal very fast. But again, everything, it seemed to line up just perfectly. Releasing that baggage is kind of what was needed really to open the door for new opportunities. And so for the next year, everything was just like that. I found my dance community again. My children, they loved their school. My daughter was back on the Olympic track for gymnastics. My son started flying planes through a free program called Young Eagles. I found the job that I have now. The house is amazing. It's been 2 years now. Well, October will be 2 years. So everything just lined up perfectly. And then, I just kind of kept on that path for a while.
How'd you find out about Grace After Fire?
So when I was starting to settle in and realize that, hey, my disability check is not cutting it, I couldn't, and this has been the story of since the divorce, I don't qualify for anything. It seems like the government just puts us right over that red tape line when you're 100%. So you can't qualify for food stamps. You can't qualify for housing assistance, the Veterans Section 8 kind of voucher. I didn't have really great medical insurance. In Hawaii, I was under the choice program, so I was able to see regular doctors out in the community, which I felt was extremely helpful for what I was going through. So I knew I needed money and I knew I needed good coverage. I was like 4 miles out of the choice mileage range. And going to the VA here was just not cutting it. It was causing more problems than it was good. So I came in here, I heard about Combined Arms, how they are kind of the hub for all things. And when I was looking for employment, through the Next Up office, I walked by Grace After Fire and I was like, hey, what do you guys do? Not ever knowing about them or hearing about them. And they were like, well, we help women veterans or anyone that identifies with women veterans through any kind of military sexual trauma or PTSD, that kind of nature. I was like, because up until this point, I had never said anything. And I was like, wow, this is all again lined up to be. One of the things that I realized through all of these things I went through was that it was really never about me. It was about the lessons I was learning. And for me, I kind of had a different mindset where I was like, I can't really talk about something I don't know. So if I have all these firsthand experiences, what am I going to do with it? So when I met Tana, I was like, wow, and I needed the help severely. Like I had no food. It was just kind of bad for a while when we first moved here. And as we got to talk, I was like, maybe this is my chance to kind of pay forward some of the things that other women had helped me through. And so we kind of really just clicked and they did a lot for me. They weren't like a crutch to lean on permanently, but they were like a step up. And so there was only one other organization that had really ever done that for me before. And I just knew that I needed to stay connected. I didn't know how or what was going to happen or come from it, but they have been one of the biggest, stepping stones in my healing since moving here.
So what kind of programs did they have that you took advantage of?
At that time, I think it was some gift cards for like food and gas, just little simple things. They also had the group. I didn't really take part of that because I was so busy with other things that were, that was helping in that area. After Harvey, there was some more assistance because we did get a little bit of water in our house. Smaller things like backpack assistance, because that stuff adds up. And when you're already kind of looking for basic essentials, that's not really something that you think about, $1 for a pencil or whatnot. They shoved 2 bags full of everything that I needed. And just the constant support, the community support that they provide. If I'm just having a bad day, I know I can call Hannah and be like, hey, it's not a good day right now, and I just need some feedback. And she's always been there, She has referred me out to other agencies as well, like Dress for Success was a huge one. So when I was going out to find my job, I needed new clothes. I had lost a lot of weight. And so I really didn't have professional dress attire. So just having them advocate on my behalf and allowing me to, feel like a woman going back into the workforce was huge. So.
Tell me how your life has changed.
Now?
Yeah, tell me how different it is.
It's huge. It has been a complete 180. I never really felt like I was completely down in the gutters, just because I think my mindset was always very optimistic, right? Um, but it was hard. It was really hard. There was days where I'm like just praying I can get through the night and then wake up to a new day, and not knowing what really to expect was probably the most challenging, especially the kids. Having the kids like under me, and I'm responsible not only for my own well-being but for theirs, was just, whew, that was a big heavy burden that was lifted. It's not perfect now. There's still struggles every day, but overall, I mean, what we have now compared to a year and 9 months ago is completely different. Completely. We just feel free. We're less stressed. We have more money. If we want to go out and do things, we can do that. Just those small things are just huge. So I'm really, really happy for the little bit amount of time to now. It's been great.
You talked about giving back kind of earlier.
Mm-hmm.
You're almost to that point where you might want to start thinking about it.
I actually have. Luckily, through the amazing company that I work for, their military veterans initiative that they have, they knew a little bit about my story, and they kind of believed in what we went through could help other women, veterans, and children, especially the three dynamics I just named. When I first said a long time ago that I wanted to be an advocate for women, veterans, and children, they're like, no, you need to narrow down the scope. And I'm like, you can't. I'm a veteran, I'm a woman, and I have children. And that category often goes overlooked. We're very invisible a lot of the times. And it's a struggle when you're all three of those. So they did a documentary, and it was sent out over the web, and it received a lot of reviews. And the outreach and the stories I've heard from that have been so empowering. Just to know that it was just a simple story that we had that can now help other people that are, whatever phase they're going through, that there's something I can provide, whether it's hope or a shoulder to cry on, or it's going to be okay, pat on the back, whatever the case is. I feel like, again, I went through those situations to be able to help other people. It's no use if I don't help other people at this point. Because of the documentary, I was able to talk with the CDC, and be very raw and authentic with them, down to the nitty-gritty details, about why I never reported it back in Okinawa, Japan, and what exactly happened and things like that. Because oftentimes the repercussion of telling such a story would be far worse than me just not saying anything at all. From that CDC interview, there's been some podcast requests and some interviews like this. And I'm extremely happy to be able to provide, a little bit of insight to what women veterans go through.
And in that vein, they also say that women are the most visible service members, but
Yes.
the most invisible veterans.
That is 100% true.
And what do you think about what people are doing now to make veterans issues more visible, or at least make the public more aware of their existence?
I don't think the public is going to fully understand ever unless you've served. Little things that we can do, like this march that's coming up on June 9th, that's going to raise some awareness, and it's going to make some questions come flying out and have some red flags. Continuing to push and supporting the other women veterans is really going to be, I feel, the best way that we're going to be able to handle it, because the general population, we are such a small population that they just don't understand. I mean, they already think we're broken and weak and all these other things anyways, but we're not. We're mothers. We're caregivers, we're supporters to our husbands, sometimes dual active military. We carry a load, I think more so than the guys in the military. Um, and we're side by side now. So, and we're just the emotionally compassionate side of it as well. So we carry that load as well. But some of us are, super strong. But the civilian world will never, I don't believe, ever understand that unless you served. So.
Good job. You're
Is
done.
that it? Yay!
All right, just stay where you're at. 4 minutes from there. All right. So tell me about
Let's wait for him, make sure he's good.
yeah.
Am I good? Okay, he said good.
All right. All right. So just tell me about Hawaii and what you did for therapy and.
Well, I started a dance. I started seeing a private therapist, and she actually used, with her somatic therapy, a style of a dance called kizomba, which comes from an African country of Angola. And at that time, I wasn't very fond of the dance because, number one, I just had this whole transition of a divorce, so I didn't want to touch like any man or look at any man, and I had the Great Wall of China up, and I didn't want anyone in my bubble. And here she is, a female, and she's requesting that I go chest to chest and be in this very close connection dance. And I'm like, you're crazy. But what happened was they used to have these potluck dance parties under the fireworks on Friday evenings, and it just happened to be the Friday that they were having this social for free. Bring something, meet people, get out of your house, and just dance. So I went there, and I never looked back after that. So every therapy session I had revolved around kizomba. I just loved, as I started researching it, it was more about culture and community and connection, and those were all the things I was missing at that time. And it's basically a dance that's in a hug hold. So you're feeling other people's energy as you're dancing. If they're stressed, you're stressed. If they're happy, you're happy. And you almost can't walk away without being happy. It's the craziest feeling ever, and only Kizomba dancers understand what I'm saying. But when you hold that close, like, you have to be happy or else it's going to be a horrible dance, right? So as I left Hawaii, that was one of the very first things I looked after here in Houston. And I found a couple of groups and some socials that were free. I'm all about free. So I started going once a week, and my kizomba started getting way, way better. And that's when the traveling started coming in, going to different festivals and learning from higher level instructors. And fast forward to this year, actually, I've decided to help start a nonprofit for the community. So having free or pretty close to free events so that the entire community can understand what it's like when you don't have money, but yet you still want to do something that you love. And that's how I learned. So this will be for women and men and children and families. And eventually we'd like to start this nonprofit for an educational community, so providing scholarships to young children that want to travel to Angola and understand the culture. Not necessarily having to be of a Angolan background, because of course I'm not Angolan, but this is for the entire community to understand how therapeutic is actually scientifically and medically proven that this particular style of dance can help people with PTSD. So I've been doing a little bit of research with some veterans and how this dance has particularly impacted their life. And there'll be some things coming from this in the very near future. So we'll just leave it like that.
Great.
Yes.
Sounds awesome.
It is. Super excited.
I want to see the dance.
Okay, I'll show you the dance.
So please tell me when I can.
Oh yeah,
come out and see
I can email it to you, or
it. Okay.
pictures or something.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Very good.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
You're welcome.